Michael Carter lived in Chicago, Illinois, a city known for its tall buildings, cold winds, and fast-paced business life. At 32 years old, he worked as a data analyst at Northpoint Solutions, a mid-sized tech company located on Wacker Drive near the Chicago River. Michael was excellent with numbers. He could read data like a book, find patterns no one else noticed, and turn complicated information into simple explanations, at least on paper. But when it came to speaking, everything changed. He was shy. His voice shook during meetings. His throat tightened whenever he had to speak in front of more than 3 people. He often watched others get promotions because they spoke confidently, even if their work wasn't as strong as his. Still, Michael believed that one day, he would get his chance. The day of the announcement on a freezing Monday morning in January, the office buzzed with unusual energy. People gathered near the meeting room, holding coffee cups and whispering, "Did you hear?" One co-worker said, "Big clients are visiting next week." Another replied. Michael sat down, wondering what this meant for the team. When the CEO, Laura Thompson, entered the room, everyone sat up straight. She was known for her powerful voice, clear, calm, and full of confidence. People listened when she spoke. Laura made an announcement. "Next week, we will present our annual performance report to the New York investors. This presentation is extremely important for the future of our company." Michael felt a little nervous just hearing the words presentation. Then Laura continued, "The report was written by Michael Carter." Avery had turned toward him. Michael felt his stomach twist. Laura smiled and said, "Michael, since you created the report, I want you to present it." His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear the rest of the meeting. "Present it? To investors?" In New York City, a decision in the cold Chicago night that evening, Michael walked home through the snowy streets, the cold wind hitting his face. Cars honked, trains roared overhead, and people rushed by, typical Chicago chaos. But inside, Michael felt something more powerful than the winter chill, fear, doubt, and a small spark of determination. He thought about all the opportunities he had missed because he couldn't speak confidently. He realized this presentation might be the moment that finally pushed him to grow. When he arrived home, he made a cup of hot tea, sat at his small kitchen table, opened his laptop, and typed into Google, "How to speak like a leader." He expected a simple answer, but instead he found something bigger: 6 powerful steps used by great leaders across the USA, steps that could transform his voice, his confidence, and maybe even his life. Michael took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he said out loud, "I'm going to learn how to speak like a leader." It all started that night. For the next few days, Michael couldn't focus on anything except the upcoming presentation in New York. Every time he imagined standing in front of investors in a Manhattan conference room, his chest tightened. His co-workers acted normal, but inside his mind, the countdown had already started. 3 days after the announcement, Michael decided to take action. He left the office early and walked to the Harold Washington Library Center downtown. It was warm inside, quiet, and full of people reading, studying, and working, a perfect place to think. He found a table near a large window overlooking State Street and opened his laptop again. He had saved a website called 6 Steps to Leader-Level Communication. That night, he began with Step 1, Presence before words. Learning Step 1, Presence. The article explained something surprising. People listen to you before you speak. They look at your posture, your face, your eyes, your stillness. Michael never thought about this. He always believed communication was only about words. But the more he read, the more it made sense. The guide explained 3 small changes that create a leader's presence: stand tall, shoulders relaxed, chest open, make calm, steady eye contact, breathe slowly to control your nervous system. Michael sat up straighter at the library table and tried the exercises right there. He inhaled slowly, held it, and exhaled. For the first time in days, he felt his heartbeat begin to slow. A quiet confidence touched him, even if only for a moment. Meeting a stranger who changed his mindset as he practiced breathing, an older man sitting nearby noticed. The man had silver hair, glasses, and a friendly smile. He leaned slightly toward Michael and said, "Public speaking nerves." Michael froze. "Is it that obvious?" The man laughed softly. "I teach business communication at Northwestern University. You've seen that look 1,000 times. Michael explained his situation, how he wrote the report, how the CEO chose him to present, and how terrified he felt. The professor nodded. Well, let me tell you something simple, he said. Leadership doesn't start with speaking. It starts with being grounded. Michael listened carefully as the professor continued. Before every lecture, before every talk, I stop for 10 seconds. I breathe. I stand tall. I remind myself that I belong in the room. If you do that, your audience will feel it too. The man handed Michael a business card. Come by my office if you ever want tips. First sessions free. Michael smiled, surprised by the kindness of a stranger. Thank you. I really needed this. You'll do fine, the professor said as he packed his bag. Just remember, speak from your center, not your fear. A small victory. Walking home through the Chicago night, Michael noticed something different. He felt a little taller. His shoulders were relaxed. He wasn't cured of fear, not even close, but he had taken the first real step. He wasn't just preparing a presentation. He was becoming someone new. The next step would push him even further, but Michael didn't know that yet. The next morning, Chicago was unusually bright. Sunlight reflected off the glass buildings as Michael walked into the office. Normally, he kept his head down, hoping no one would pull him into a conversation. But today felt different. He stood a little straighter. He breathed more calmly, still nervous, of course, but not frozen. During the team's daily meeting, he tried practicing step 1, presence. When his manager asked for progress updates, Michael lifted his head, kept his shoulders relaxed, and answered slowly and clearly. For the first time, people actually turned to listen. After the meeting, his coworker Jenna said, "Hey, you sound more confident today. Did you sleep well or something?" Michael just smiled and shrugged, something like that. Discovering step 2, the voice of a leader. That evening, back in his apartment, Michael made dinner, simple chicken and rice, and sat down with his laptop again. He opened the same webpage and moved to step 2, your voice matters more than your words. The article explained that a leader's voice has 3 qualities: clarity, speaking at a steady pace so every word lands; warmth, sounding human, friendly; and open, strength, speaking from the diaphragm, not the throat. Michael read an example. A weak voice makes people doubt you. A strong voice makes people trust you. He swallowed hard. That had been his problem his whole life, practicing in the most American way possible. The guide suggested recording yourself while speaking. Michael hated the idea. He didn't even like hearing his voicemail recordings. But he knew if he wanted to succeed in New York, he had to face his discomfort. So he opened the voice memos app on his phone and read a paragraph from his presentation. When he played it back, he cringed. He sounded unsure. Fast. Out of breath, not a leader. Not even close, but he didn't stop. He read it again, slower this time. Then again, deeper. Then again, with warmth. He practiced like this for nearly an hour. Finally, he listened to a new recording. This time, his voice sounded different. Not perfect, but steady. He whispered to himself, I can do this. A lesson at the coffee shop. The next day, Michael went to a local cafe before work, Intelligentsia Coffee in the Loop. While waiting for his drink, he noticed a woman struggling to calm down her crying toddler. People looked annoyed, but Michael felt empathy. He remembered step 2, warmth. He approached gently and said, Hi, is everything okay? Do you need help carrying something? The woman looked surprised but grateful. Thank you. It's just tired. Michael smiled at the child and spoke softly, with a calm tone, the same tone he had been practicing. The toddler actually stopped crying for a moment, watching him curiously. Wow, the mother said. You're good with kids. Michael shook his head. No, just learning how to talk in a better way. As he walked out with his coffee, he realized something important. Powerful communication wasn't just for presentations. It helped in everyday life too. A step forward, a fear behind. Back at his apartment that evening, he looked at the calendar. Only 5 days left until the New York presentation. He had improved his posture. He had begun strengthening his voice, but the biggest challenges were still ahead. Confidence, storytelling, connection, leadership, presence under pressure. Michael didn't know if he would master all 6 steps in time, but for the first time in his life, he believed he could. By Thursday morning, the office at North Point Solutions was busier than ever. Everyone was preparing for the New York trip. Slides were being polished, emails were flying, and people from other departments were asking questions about the upcoming investor meeting. Michael felt pressure rising again, like a shadow creeping behind him, even with his progress. He still doubted himself. At 10 de la mañana, the CEO, Laura Thompson, stopped by his desk. "How's the preparation going?" she asked. Michael swallowed. "Good. I'm working on the speaking part." She smiled warmly. "You have the knowledge. Just believe in it. You do great." Her confidence in him made his heart race. He wished he could see himself the way she did. Facing step 3, confidence isn't natural, it's built. That evening, Michael sat at his small dining table with his laptop. He clicked on step 3, confidence through preparation and mindset. The first sentence hit him hard. Confidence is not something you suddenly feel, confidence is something you build through preparation. The article explained 3 powerful techniques used by leaders across the USA. 1. Rearse out loud, not in your head. Leaders speak the words until their brain treats them like music, not fear. 2. Visualize success, not just the room. Visualize yourself standing tall, speaking clearly, finishing strong. 3. Rewrite the story in your head. Instead of "I'm nervous," say, "I'm prepared. I belong here. I earned this." Michael stared at these lines for several minutes. He realized he had spent years telling himself the wrong story. "I'm shy. I'm not good at speaking. I embarrass myself." But now, he began writing a new story. The practice session that nearly broke him. Michael decided to rehearse the full presentation out loud. He stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, straightened his posture, breathed deeply, and began. The first 2 minutes were okay, then he stumbled, lost his place, forgot what came next. He suddenly froze and stared at himself in the mirror. "This is impossible," he whispered. He felt old insecurities rush back like a wave, but then he remembered the professor's words at the library. Leadership doesn't start with speaking. It starts with being grounded. Michael put his hands on the desk, closed his eyes, and breathed slowly. The shaking in his hands faded, the tightness in his throat softened. He tried again. This time, he reached 5 minutes, then 7. Then the whole 10-minute presentation. It still wasn't perfect, but it was progress. An unexpected confidence boost. On Friday afternoon, his manager assigned him to give a small internal preview of the presentation to the team, just 5 co-workers. The old Michael would have panicked, but now, he saw it as training. He stood at the front of the meeting room. The projector hummed. People waited. His palms were sweating, but he remembered to breathe. He began speaking. At first, his voice was shaky. But after a few sentences, it steadied. He kept his tone warm, his pace clear, his posture strong. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause. Jenna raised her eyebrows. "Wow, Michael, where did that come from?" His manager smiled. "You're ready for New York." Michael felt a wave of relief, mixed with pride. For the first time in his life, he believed it might be true. The flight awaits. As he walked out of the office, he checked his phone. Flight to New York, Monday, 7:25 a.m. He stood outside, looking at the Chicago skyline glowing against the evening sky. The cold wind hit his face, but inside, he felt something warm and alive. He had learned presence. He had strengthened his voice. He had built confidence. Next week, in front of investors in Manhattan, everything would come together. But there were still 3 powerful steps left to master, and those steps would change everything. The weekend arrived, and Chicago felt calmer than usual. Snow covered the sidewalks, and the air was sharp and cold. Michael spent Saturday morning packing for the New York trip, dress shirts, his laptop, printed slides, and a notebook full of speaking notes, but he knew something was still missing. He had presence. He had voice control. He had growing confidence. Yet his presentation still felt dry. Informative, yes. Clear, yes, but it didn't connect. That's when he opened the 4th chapter on the website. Step 4, tell a story, not a report. The first sentence said, "People don't remember facts, they remember stories, emotions, and moments." Michael sat up straighter. This was what he needed, understanding the heart of storytelling. The guide explained 3 storytelling rules used by leaders, CEOs, and great speakers across the USA. 1. Start with a human moment before charts and numbers. Show the human side, a problem, a challenge, a real situation. 2. Add emotion to the logic. Facts explain things, emotion makes people care. 3. In with meaning. Every story should answer one question: why does this matter? Michael realized his presentation lacked this. It was all data, clean, perfect, but lifeless. He needed a story. Finding the story hidden in the data. Michael spent hours reviewing the report he had written, revenue trends, customer feedback, growth patterns. But none of it felt like a story. Then he saw something small but powerful. A spike in customer satisfaction came from one specific feature update, a change suggested by a small team in the company's Phoenix, Arizona branch. Their manager had pushed for it, believing it would help customers, even though the idea was risky and time-consuming. That story represented innovation, teamwork, and leadership. Michael smiled. This is it, he thought. He rewrote the opening of his presentation. Last year, our customer satisfaction jumped 14%. It started with a small idea from a team in Phoenix, an idea that almost didn't happen. Suddenly, the presentation sounded alive. A lesson from a Sunday visitor. On Sunday afternoon, Michael decided to take a break. He visited his parents, who lived in a quiet neighborhood in the Chicago suburbs. His mother, always curious, asked, "So, tell us again, why did they choose you to speak in New York?" Michael took a deep breath and explained the story he had just written about the Phoenix team. He spoke slowly, with confidence, painting a picture of the challenge and the solution. When he finished, his father said, "You told that like a real leader." Michael froze. His father wasn't someone who gave compliments easily. "You didn't just talk about numbers," his father continued, "you made us feel something." Michael felt warmth spread through him. His storytelling worked. He realized, if he could move his parents, who had heard him speak awkwardly his whole life, then maybe he could move investors in New York too. A moment of calm before the journey. That night, Michael walked outside. Snowflakes drifted gently through the suburban streetlights. He stood there thinking about everything he had learned. Presence, voice, confidence, storytelling. Each step had changed him. Each step had brought him closer to becoming someone he never thought he could be. Tomorrow, he would board a plane to New York City. Tomorrow, everything would become real. Michael closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "I'm ready for this." But the most important lessons, the last two steps, were still waiting for him. Monday morning finally arrived. Dark sky. Cold air. A light snow falling across Chicago ORA Airport. Michael stood in line at Terminal 3, holding his boarding pass to New York City. His stomach fluttered with nerves, excitement, and fear all mixed together. The team from North Point Solutions gathered near Gate H14, checking emails, drinking coffee, and talking quietly. Their CEO, Laura Thompson, walked over to him. "You ready, Michael?" He nodded, though he wasn't completely sure. Laura smiled. "Just remember, speak to people, not at them." He knew what she meant. It was time for Step 5, connection. On the plane, a lesson from a stranger. During the flight, Michael sat next to an older woman with a red wool coat and a warm smile. She introduced herself as Mrs. Richardson, a retired school principal visiting her daughter in Brooklyn. "What brings you to New York?" she asked. Michael hesitated, then said, "I'm giving a presentation. Big investors." Kind of nervous. She chuckled gently. "Oh, honey, I ran a school for 32 years. Let me tell you something, people don't care how perfect you are. They care how real you are." Michael raised his eyebrows. "Real?" She nodded. "When you speak, look at them like you see them, not as judges, but as people." He absorbed every word. This was Step 5 pulgadas action. Connection over perfection. Arriving in New York City, the plane landed at LaGuardia Airport just after noon. As the team drove to Manhattan, Michael stared out the taxi window. The skyline, the noise, the endless energy of the city, tall buildings, fast cars, honking horns, the city of pressure and opportunity. They checked into a midtown hotel, and after a short break, Laura called the team for a final rehearsal in the conference room downstairs. Michael set up his laptop, heart pounding. This was his last practice before the real thing. Final rehearsal. The missing piece. He began speaking, using everything he had learned. Strong posture, steady voice, confident pace, clear storytelling. It was good, but still, something felt missing. When he finished, Laura looked thoughtful. "You're prepared," she said, "but you're holding back emotionally." Michael blinked. "Emotionally?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "You're speaking like someone who wants to avoid mistakes, not like someone who wants to connect." He swallowed. She was right. "How do I fix that?" he asked. Laura smiled. "Talk to the audience like you talk to someone you care about. And suddenly, everything clicked. He had been talking like a robot trying to be perfect, not like a leader trying to connect. A walk through Times Square that evening, after rehearsal, Michael walked alone through Times Square. Bright screens flashed ads. Crowds moved in every direction. Street performers danced. Taxis honked. The city vibrated with life. Michael found a quiet corner and closed his eyes. He imagined the investors sitting in the room tomorrow, not as judges, not as critics, but as people who wanted clarity, honesty, and connection. He whispered to himself, "Speak to them, not at them." In that moment, he felt something shift inside him. A calm determination, deeper than before. He was no longer just practicing. He was becoming ready. The night before the presentation back at the hotel, he reviewed his slides one last time, then shut his laptop. He stood in front of the mirror, breathing slowly, grounding himself. He didn't try to sound perfect this time. He tried to sound genuine, and for the first time he felt not just prepared, he felt connected. Tomorrow was the presentation, the moment everything would be put to the test, and the final step, step 6, would determine everything. Tuesday morning arrived with a soft, gray New York sky. From the window of his 14th-floor hotel room, Michael could see the city waking up. Yellow taxis rushing down Septima Avenue, people in coats hurrying to work, steam rising from street vents. Today was the day. The presentation, the moment that could change everything. Michael dressed carefully, a navy blue suit, white shirt, dark tie. He checked the time, 8:05 de la mañana. The meeting was at 10. He breathed slowly, remembering step 1. He spoke a sentence aloud, remembering step 2. He repeated his mindset phrases, remembering step 3. He reviewed his story, remembering step 4. He thought of his audience as real people, remembering step 5. Then he opened the web page again and read the final chapter. Step 6, lead the room. The first line sent a chill down his spine. Leaders do not avoid pressure, leaders guide others through it. Michael knew this last step would make or break him. Arriving at the investor office at 9:30 de la mañana, the North Point team entered the tall glass building on 6th Avenue. The lobby smelled like polished marble and fresh coffee. The atmosphere was quiet, serious, expensive. They rode the elevator to the 22nd floor, where the meeting room was prepared. Large windows overlooked the city. A long table. A projecte. Water bottles arranged neatly. Michael set up his laptop, hands slightly shaking, his heart thumped in his chest. Laura noticed. She walked over and whispered, "Jury ready." "Pressure is normal." "You say it." He nodded, but he wasn't sure he believed it. The unexpected problem at exactly 10 de la mañana, the investors entered the room, 6 people in dark suits, carrying tablets and notebooks. They shook hands, exchanged greetings, and took their seats. Michael clicked on his presentation file. Nothing happened. He clicked again, still nothing. A red error message appeared on the screen, file not found. Michael felt his throat close. This couldn't be happening, not now. Not today. He checked the USB drive again, then the folder, the file. His entire presentation was gone. His pulse skyrocketed, his palms began sweating, his stomach twisted so hard he thought he might faint. The investors exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat. Michael felt himself getting smaller by the second. Everything he practiced felt like it was slipping away. Laura stepped closer and whispered, "Breathe. You know this presentation. Lead the room." Moments that define you. Michael closed his eyes for 2 seconds. He inhaled deeply, he exhaled slowly, and a single thought came to him. I wrote the report. I rehearsed it 100 times. I can lead without slides. He turned to the investors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steadying, "it seems we're having a technical issue. But fortunately, I know this material extremely well. If it's all right with you, I'll walk through the report verbally." The investors nodded. The pressure was heavy, but he stepped into it, leading the room without a screen. He began with the story of the Phoenix team, the human moment. He explained the data trends in clear language. He used his hands to guide the room through complex parts. He paused with confidence, letting ideas sink in. He made eye contact, one person at a time. He didn't rush. He didn't apologize. He didn't hide behind his nerves. He led. Halfway through, one investor leaned forward and said, "This is one of the clearest explanations we've had in years." Another nodded. That Phoenix example, that was powerful. Michael felt a swell of courage. He continued with warmth, strength, and clarity. When he reached the final line of the report, he said, "And that is why this year's performance isn't just numbers, it's a story of innovation, teamwork, and leadership." Silence filled the room, then, applause, real, genuine applause. After the meeting when the investors left, Laura turned to him, eyes shining. Michael, that was extraordinary. You didn't they just present. You led the room. His co-workers patted him on the back, congratulating him. Michael felt light, relieved, proud, and most of all, transformed that he had faced pressure, that he had survived a disaster, and he had still delivered, that he did it, that he spoke like a leader. But the story wasn't over yet. Big news was coming, news that would change his future forever. Michael stood near the window of the 22nd floor conference room, watching the investors leave. Their footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. This was his moment of transformation, but also a moment for deep reflection. Quiet after the storm. When the door closed behind the last investor, the room felt empty and still. The projector sat unused, the lights were soft. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain out of his body. That he remembered how terrified he felt minutes before, the file missing, his throat tightening, his mind racing. But he didn't let that fear ruin his performance. Instead, he leaned into it. That he realized something powerful: leaders don't wait for perfect conditions. They lead through the chaos. This aligns with strong leadership theory. Effective leaders, especially in crises, pause, assess, and make decisions intentionally, even when everything seems to be going wrong. Paul Keiser, calm. Michael thought of how he stayed grounded, breathing, staying calm, remembering his purpose. Those techniques helped him turn pressure into strength. Latbe leadership, come +1. A conversation with Laura, the CEO, walked over, smiling. She was proud, but also contemplative. That was brave, she said softly. You didn't just tell data, you led despite everything. Michael nodded. I almost panicked when the file disappeared. But I remembered what I practiced, how to speak without relying on slides. She placed a hand on his shoulder. That's real leadership. Not about avoiding pressure, but about guiding through it. Michael felt a wave of relief. He realized he had internalized step 6, leading under pressure, lessons they shared later that afternoon. Michael and Laura sat down in a small cafe near their hotel to debrief. They talked about what went well, and what almost went wrong. Some of his key takeaways: purpose over panic. When things go wrong, grounding yourself in why you're speaking helps. According to leadership experts, great leaders remain purpose-driven in crisis. Paul Keiser, come through assessment. Instead of reacting instantly, pause to collect your thoughts. That allows you to find clarity in chaos. Quality. Global transparency and honesty. Being open about a problem, like his missing file, shows courage and builds trust. Paul Keiser, com courage plus caution. Leaders have to balance taking bold action with thoughtful caution. Paul Keiser, com. Laura also gave him feedback on his physical presence. You stood tall, made eye contact, used your hands when you spoke. That presence made a big difference. That echoed leadership presence advice. Good posture, intentional gestures, and clarity in voice are key. RichardReed.com +1. A moment of emotional growth. As they finished their coffee, Michael felt something shift inside him. Before this trip, he saw public speaking as a terrifying task, something he had to do. Now, he saw it as a way to influence, connect, and lead. He thought about the investor who leaned forward mid-talk, listening closely to his story. He remembered the pause he made before his final line. He felt gratitude for the difficult moments, the missing file, the fear, because they had pushed him to grow. This was not just a presentation. It was a turning point. A quiet promise to himself. Back in his hotel room that evening, Michael opened his notebook. On a new page, he wrote, I lead with purpose. I stay calm in chaos. I turn pressure into power. He stared at those words and repeated them softly. He knew his journey wasn't over. There were more challenges ahead, more rooms to lead, more presentations to give. But he also knew something else. He was no longer the same Michael as before. He had spoken like a leader, and now, he would keep leading. Michael woke up the next morning to the soft sound of sunlight slipping through the curtains of his New York hotel room. His body was still tired from yesterday's intense presentation, but his mind felt strangely fresh, as if something inside him had awakened. He prepared a cup of hotel room coffee and sat at the desk, reviewing the notes he had written the night before. I lead with purpose. I stay calm in chaos. I turn pressure into power. He smiled. He felt different now, not just confident, but capable. The phone call. As he sipped his coffee, Michael's phone buzzed. The caller ID surprised him. Brandon Hayes, the lead investor. The same man who had grilled him with tough questions during the meeting. Michael took a breath and answered. Michael, Brandon said in his calm, deep voice, I wanted to speak with you directly. Michael straightened in his chair. There was something about your presentation yesterday, Brandon continued. You didn't rely on the slides. You spoke with clarity and conviction. You handled pressure like a true leader. Michael felt his heartbeat quicken. Brandon went on, investors don't just invest in products. We invest in people. And yesterday, you proved you're someone worth trusting. There was a pause, then the moment, wherein we want to fund your project. Michael nearly dropped his coffee. He stood up from his chair, overwhelmed. The company had been working for months for this opportunity, and now the door had opened. Thank you, Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. I promise you won't regret this. Brandon laughed lightly. You earned it. Leadership under pressure isn't common. Keep doing what you did yesterday. When the call ended, Michael stared at his phone, stunned that he had just changed the future of his company. Sharing the news, Michael rushed downstairs, nearly bumping into other guests in the lobby. He stepped outside onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk, taxis rushing by, people in suits hurrying to work, the crisp morning air filling his lungs. He dialed Laura immediately. She picked up on the first ring. Everything okay? She asked. They said yes, he replied, barely containing his excitement. The investors are all in. Laura gasped. Michael, that's incredible. You did it. No, he said softly, we did it. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, letting the victory sink in. This wasn't just a business win, it was validation. Proof that preparation, clarity, courage, and emotional control truly mattered. A walk through New York. Michael spent the next hour walking through the streets of Manhattan. Everything felt different, brighter, more meaningful. He passed a group of students laughing on a corner, a street musician playing a saxophone, a man selling coffee from a small cart. The city felt alive, as if celebrating with him. He thought about all the times he had doubted himself, all the nights he practiced speaking in front of a mirror, all the moments he struggled to control his fear. Now, all of it had led him here, to a turning point not just in his career, but in his life. A message from his mentor while walking through Bryant Park. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Professor Howard, the public speaking instructor from his university days. Heard the news from Laura. Proud of you, Michael. Remember, leaders are made in the moments when they refuse to give up. Michael sat on a bench, reading the message twice. He felt his eyes grow warm. He whispered to himself, I didn't give up. And for the first time, he truly believed it. The inner transformation. Michael realized something important. Leadership wasn't a position. It wasn't a title. It wasn't standing in front of a boardroom with perfect slides. Leadership was a mindset. A way of carrying yourself. A willingness to step forward even when things fall apart. Yesterday, he had stepped forward, and everything changed. He had spoken like a leader, and now, life was responding to that new version of him. 2 months later, Michael stood inside the Grand Hall of the North Point headquarters in Chicago. The room was filled with more than 200 employees, engineers, designers, analysts, managers, all gathered to hear one thing, the announcement of the company's new future, powered by the investment Michael helped secure. Bright lights shone down from the ceiling. A large North Point banner hung behind the stage. People whispered excitedly, waiting for the presentation to begin, and at the center of it all stood Michael, adjusting the microphone on the podium. Today wasn't just another meeting. Today, he was delivering the most important speech of his life. The moment before speaking, Michael's heart beat a little faster as he looked at the crowd. Even after everything he had been through, he still felt the nerves, the tremble of uncertainty, the weight of responsibility. But this time, he welcomed it. He placed his hands gently on the sides of the podium. He took a slow breath in and out, like he had learned. Like a leader, Laura stood in the front row, arms crossed, smiling with quiet pride. Professor Howard had even flown in, sitting 2 rows behind her. Michael straightened his back, lifted his chin, and began the speech. Good morning, everyone, he said, and the room instantly fell silent. I stand here today not because everything went perfectly, but because things went wrong, and we chose to rise anyway. The employees leaned in. Michael could feel the connection growing. The day we met the investors in New York, our slides failed, our technology failed, but something else didn't fail. It paused, our team didn't fail, and more importantly, our belief didn't fail. Nods spread across the crowd, some people smiled, some looked emotional. Michael continued, "We earned this investment not by showing perfect numbers but by showing strength, the kind of strength that comes from clarity, honesty, and leadership." He walked slowly away from the podium, using the stage like a storyteller. "We're re-entering a new chapter, not a chapter of fear, but a chapter of courage, creativity, and unity." He pointed gently toward the audience, "And every single person in this room is part of that story." The room erupted in applause, but Michael held up a hand, smiling. "One last thing," he said. "I once read 6 steps about how to speak like a leader, but I realized something important." He placed a hand over his chest. "Leadership isn't learned in a book, it's learned in the moments when everything falls apart, and you decide to stand tall anyway." Silence, powerful, deep silence, then, thunderous applause. People stood, people cheered. Michael felt his eyes water, just a little. After the speech later that evening, the team gathered on the rooftop terrace of the building. The Chicago skyline glowed behind them as everyone celebrated, laughed, and took photos. Laura approached Michael with a plate of food and a knowing smile. "Jube changed," she said softly. Michael laughed. "For the better, I hope." "For the stronger," she corrected. "You speak differently now. You lead differently, people listen when you talk." He looked out at the city lights, feeling the cool wind on his face. "I'm not sure I became a leader," he said. "I just learned to be myself, without fear." "That," Laura replied, "is what leadership really is." The final lesson before leaving the rooftop that night, Michael stood alone for a moment. He thought about the long journey, the nervous nights practicing speeches, the fear that almost stopped him, the disaster with the broken slides, the courage to continue, the victory that followed, and he whispered to himself, "A leader isn't someone who speaks loudly. A leader is someone who speaks with purpose." He walked back inside, confident, calm, transformed. His story was complete, but his leadership was only just beginning.